Because I am a predictable former film student, I really like the works of Lars von Trier. I think he's an interesting filmmaker, even though I might not necessarily enjoy watching all of his movies. I usually get something out of them, or at least find them interesting enough to watch, even if I do kind of disagree that they might be of high quality. Anyway, that doesn't matter. What matters is that I think Antichrist is a genuinely great movie by him. At least I think it is, because I've only seen it the once and can't bring myself to properly watch it again. That's because this is part of his Depression trilogy, which sounds as fun as it is. It's about this couple, this man and a woman, after the death of their baby, which is shown in the opening to melodramatic effect. They go into the woods to essentially kind of like deal with their grief and trauma, but then you get this kind of weird power play going on, because the man played by Willem Dafoe he's like a psychiatrist, so he's trying to understand his wife's grief. That leads to resentment, and most importantly, it leads to some of the most grisly acts of violence I've ever seen on screen. I don't even want to describe most of what happens, but know that there's a lot of knob terror in this, a lot of genital mutilation that you see far too much of, and even talking about it makes my skin crawl a little bit. But it's not necessarily just the graphic nature of the violence, because loads of horror movies have a load of knob terror or graphic violence or things involving, body horror, it's an entire subgenre. What makes this so oppressive and harrowing to watch is just the overall tone. The sense of isolation and claustrophobia in this weird woods, the kind of mythic nature of it, the soundtrack, the handheld, almost documentary-esque filming style. It's just completely overwhelming in that way that a lot of Lars von Trier movies are, and it's not a nice viewing experience, intentionally so. And just don't make the same mistake I did by putting this on again because I'm a predictable former film student to try to impress someone that I fancied. Don't do that, because it's an instant mood killer, and you can never ever watch it again, because it makes you feel funny in a bad way. I don't like it. I think I've mentioned before that some horror movies just make my tummy sad. This one does it. I sound like a baby saying that, but it does. It makes me feel icky.
Right, so firstly, this was a long time ago, in my mind at least, so I might need to piece a few things together. But the horror film that I will not be watching anytime soon, and bear in mind, I don't really watch horror films anyway because they freak me out. I don't like getting freaked out. I like to relax in my spare time, not scare myself. But the horror film I ain't going to watch again anytime soon is One Missed Call. And if you've never heard of it, it's a film about a group of youngsters who, every time they get a phone call, there's this really, really horrible, creepy ringtone. It's like a lullaby ringtone. And every time you pick it up, it waits for the voicemail, and then you hear yourself moments before you die, or as you're dying. So it's not nice, not pleasant. And as some kind of cruel prank, my school friends, if you want to call them that, who I watched the film with, they thought it'd be a great idea to download the actual lullaby ringtone thing, put it onto my phone, without me knowing, obviously, and then I think I was walking through a supermarket one day, and my phone suddenly started to ring with that horrible, horrible ringtone, and I very nearly had a heart attack in the middle of Tesco. So, yeah, not a big fan of One Missed Call. Will not be watching it anytime soon, because I'm getting weird Vietnam flashbacks already. Anybody changes my ringtone again, I'm not going to be happy.
So, a horror movie that I will never watch again, I guess there's technically two, but I'm going to just say the less obvious one first, and that is Witch, with Anya Taylor-Joy, and it's the reason that I won't watch it again, I guess, is the reason that I probably should watch it again, which I guess is the reason why it doesn't really count as my option, but it's because I just found it so incredibly boring. I was so bored watching it. I kept sort of drifting in and out. I remember sort of just not paying attention because I was just so bored, and it just seemed like nothing was really happening. But the fact that it is supposed to be a brilliant horror film, and when people I ask people what their favorite horror film is of recent, a lot of them are like, oh yeah, I loved Witch, I thought it was really scary, I thought it was really good. And clearly that must be the reason as to why I need to watch it again, because I mean, those points where I must have drifted off from boredom, I must have missed something spectacular, because I just found it just really boring and really bland. And I think the only bit that I thought was cool was the very end when she becomes a witch. And yeah, so that was fun, but I probably won't watch it again because it just didn't appeal to me. I just thought it was very boring. And then the other film that I will never, ever, 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 ever watch again is Mother. And I won't tell you why, because you'll have to watch my other chatty faces to find out why. Yeah, that's it. Mother. Enough said.
Okay, so the one horror movie I will never watch again. No, this isn't a Lego piece that they used for Dracula, by the way. I know it looks like that, but there was a hair wax accident in the morning. Anyway, the one horror movie that I'll never watch again is actually one of my favourite horror movies, and that is The Babadook. That film is such a defiant and fantastic examination on what I personally think is, mental health struggles, and depression and anxiety and all that sort of stuff. And it is a very intense watch. Now, I love that film, and I think in terms of sheer visual terror alone, the Babadook is a compelling and terrifying figure, and the way they introduce the imagery of that character over the course of the film is stunning. Jennifer Kent is an absolutely fantastic filmmaker, and I love the way she ratcheted up the tension in this film. It's just something that I can't approach again because it is such an intense watch, and within all the context surrounding it in terms of the mental health stuff and just the sheer fact that the Babadook is a terrifying character and the idea of him kind of manifesting in different ways, that is a very terrifying visual metaphor, and not something I want to approach ever again. I could have been boring and said Bone Tomahawk for like the 50th video in a row because I don't want to watch a man getting chopped in half from the crotch downwards. But the Babadook is definitely something that I'm not keen to revisit anytime soon because it is just that intense, and I'm a big scaredy, big scaredy, even though I do have the Dracula hair right now, but generally just a big scaredy, and the Babadook is a scary film. Good film, but also that man. Also, just a shout out to What We Do in the Shadows, because the Babadook in that is great and is slowly but surely whittling down my terror for the actual real Babadook. Well, they're not real because they don't exist. Or do they?
Alright, so for reasons that may or may not one day become hilariously apparent to you all, I'm not really big on watching horror movies in my spare time. Like, don't get me wrong, there are some incredible movies in this genre. I really do adore some of them, but if you're going to come at me in my spare time and say, watch this horror movie, it's got to be really good, because, like, real life is horrible and bleak and miserable. Real life is a horror movie. It makes you feel anxious and scared and terrified all the time. So why do I want to project those exact same feelings directly into these big blues? I don't often, but when I do, it's usually for a good reason, like in the case of this story, trying to impress a girl in university. Anyway, the Human Centipede was getting all this buzz online on the internet, and they were like, oh, I really like to watch this film. And I was like, well, it's not going to scare me, won't you? Come round to my dorm and we'll watch it together. And the stupid thing, she actually did it. And I was going to be like, all brave and all just like, yeah, it's not even that scary. It's just a horror film. It doesn't really get me. While she's all like, protect me, Adam. But no, what actually happened was the film was just bleak and miserable and depressing, and there is no hope for any of us. And as it ended, I presumed it would end like not happy, but she would escape or she would get out, or there would just be some positive resolution to this. But no, if you've seen the film, it ends with her lying on the ground, still stitched, mouth to anus, with her friend and this complete stranger, and she's just gonna lie there. There's nothing she could do. She can't stand up, she can't move, she's just gonna starve to death unless the dead man attached to her feeds her some more dead poo. And as that film ended, I just sat there like this. For about 4 weeks, it just messed me up. There's no hope. There was no hope when I watched The Human Centipede. It left me feeling that there was no hope ever. There was no hope for me. There was no hope for any of us. Because at the end of the day, are we not all just stitched mouth to anus of life? Like, responsibilities, socializing, it's all just, it never ends. So I never want to see that film ever again. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, now this is a bit of a weird one because this is a film that I absolutely love, but will probably never be allowed to watch again, and it's The Lighthouse. So I'm going to get the praise out of the way first. I think it's incredibly atmospheric, it's darkly funny, and it's genuinely unnerving, and I'd say it's one of the best films of the last few years. You know, its cinematography especially is stunning. It kind of evokes like a 1930s classic Universal Monsters look, and 19th century photography itself really, really well. It's got these two incredible central performances. I could go on and on and on and on for hours about why The Lighthouse is such a great film. But getting to the point, I was really excited for this. I went to see it at the cinema with my girlfriend, and we watched the film, and the credits started rolling, and she looked at me and she went, "Why the fuck did you take me to see that?" And she barely said a word on the way home. She was genuinely upset with me for taking her to see The Lighthouse. And, you know, now all I have to do to really wind her up is to do an impression of that lighthouse klaxon that blares over the whole film, or whistle the ending theme from it, and she just gets really pissed off with me. So yeah, that's a film that's banned from the house, and I'm probably banned from choosing what we see at the cinema, because the next film I chose was Colour Out of Space, and she was similarly traumatized and upset. Yeah, that's that.